Hi, I'm Dr. Joanne Smith.
And I'm Dr. Corinna Hankins.
And this is
A Podful of Pediatrics.
If you want to follow more of our content, subscribe here.
Or you can visit us at onecommunityhealth.org.
Or follow us on social media at One Community Gorge.
And this is the one where we talk about summer. And if you listen through the whole episode, you're going to find everything you need to keep your children safe this summer.
Of course, yes. So summer is the best season, obviously.
No, it's really not.
Because it's when you get to be outside the most, right? And I love being warm, so that's why I love summer.
And she has always loved summer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of a fall and spring
She likes when the things die, you know?
But then they're reborn. It's like the best.
Uh-huh. So, you know, when you're outside a lot, especially when your kids are outside a lot, you have to worry about sunburn, right? And sun damage to the skin. So obviously we're going to talk about sunscreens. And sunscreens, sunblocks are kind of used interchangeably, but there's actually kind of a difference between them.
Right. And this is I feel like so important because we were not raised with sunscreen or sunblocks. And in fact, I'm not even sure my parents knew what that was.
No, it might have even been made there and I don't even know, you know.
Well, they did. We were talking about that lifeguards had the thick sunblocks.
Right, like in the 80s movies with the big white nose right there. That was the
so
zinc
you did
oxide.
have some zinc oxide things, right, that going around.
Yes.
We did not use those though,
No.
because our objective was to try to get a tan because in the 80s and 90s, that's all you were supposed to be. It was girls with a tan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
we put baby oil on, which actually just makes you burn like you're being cooked.
Yes.
Especially when you're not a person that naturally tans.
No, and we're both kind of pale, and I'm the palest one in my family, and you're even...
I'm paler than you, for sure.
So we got burned a lot, and we got burned a lot, even pre-5-year-old, which for parents, that's one of when we talk about sun damage for long term, you really want to try to keep your child from getting burned, and especially in the first 5 years of life. And then keep burns to a minimum. If your goal is to less than 5 burns in their whole lifetime, and you definitely decrease the risk of melanoma and other skin cancers.
And so the two kinds of sunblock are the organic ones, which are the chemical sunscreens, and the inorganic, which we call physical sunscreens or sunblocks.
And the organic or chemical sunscreens typically contain something like a oxybenzoate or a benzoin as the active ingredient. There are some concerns with oxybenzoin and the chemical sunscreen. In general, they're pretty safe, but they have been loosely associated with having possible hormonal effects in animal studies. And it can be, more importantly, I think, from a standpoint of kids, a real skin irritant.
Right.
And also really bad for coral reefs.
Exactly. So that's why they're banned in Hawaii.
Yes. But from a skin irritant standpoint, they were so nice when my kids were little, and I used these a lot, or tried to, because they're sprays. And the spray goes on thin, and it's easy to spray on, so you can kind of redo it really quickly when kids need it, which is super effective. But it often caused rashes, and especially young kids. So I tended to want to go with more of the physical sunscreen.
Right. And that's the one that's kind of thicker, takes a little bit longer to apply, but is going to be on there for longer. And also when kids are sweating and in water, going to stay on better. And especially for babies, that's super important.
Right. And I do think it is really nice now because a lot of those physical sunscreens have been made in different ways so that they're thinner and they can apply faster. And you can even have sprays now, which makes it so much easier to apply to young children.
Yeah.
And really zinc and your zinc-based, your titanium-based oxides are really nice in the sense that your kids' skins are really used to those, right? They're the same things we're using on diaper rashes when they first
From the very beginning, right? You can put those on baby skin. They do okay with them.
Yeah.
And kind of the key is though, just put something on, right? Whether it's the chemical ones or the physical ones.
And you really just want that barrier protection.
Right. And, the AAP, which is American Academy of Pediatrics, recommend no sunscreen under 6 months. And what they really mean is don't have your babies out in the sun under 6 months.
But if you do have your babies out in the sun, coverage is better. So you can do little tents or even in a tree, like under a tree, not in a tree.
No, put them in a tree. No babies in trees, please.
Not rockabye baby.
But yes, under some kind of coverage, canopy. And also little cute hats, and they make all kinds of SPF
so much nice
clothing.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it. SPF clothing that
really
is lightweight and prevents any kind of sun exposure.
Right, because you're really trying to protect against both ultraviolet A and ultraviolet B radiation.
Right, and B is the one that makes you have sunburn, and like most sunscreens are kind of designed to prevent against sunburn. But A is the one that we have 95% of the radiation is from A, and not the one that's really going to cause damage and cancer.
And the chemical screens actually don't protect against the A as much, whereas the physical...
Unless they say broad spectrum.
Unless they say broad spectrum. But the physical sunscreens actually protect against both naturally. So that's, again, another like good physical sunscreen. So safe, effective, and easy now to put on.
Right. And so at least 15 SPF is what you want to get, but 30 is better if you can do that. And reapply them every 2-3 hours, especially if they've been in the water or just get sweated off. Sweated off? I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
I mean, I have to say, I've been so much better with my kids than I'm sure my parents were with me, because they didn't get burnt in the first 5 years.
No.
Of course, then they all did swimming sports, which was a little bit, they totally got burned as adolescents, but I was so good for that first part.
Right. And I'll talk about, wear hats when possible, sunglasses, that there's actually increases the speed of cataract by not wearing sunglasses. So avoid eye damage. And then try not to have your little kids out during the heat of the day, which is kind of usually 10 to 2, but it depends on where you are in the world, exactly what those hours are.
And I do say, I think in the gorge, one of the things to consider is the fact that a lot of time we have wind. And when we have a lot of wind, we don't notice it's as hot or like it's often as sunny as it is. So we kind of get that cooling effect. And so sometimes we're out a lot and a lot longer than we should be. And so that's really important to remember when you have
And you can get
children.
sunburn on a cloudy day. I think that people always forget that. They're like, well, it wasn't even that sunny. Doesn't matter. Radiation's coming through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So that's kind of the most important things to know about sunscreen and sunburns.
And going to a tanning bed does not get you like a
very good
burn platform, right? It's not like going to protect you from getting burned.
Although that totally is what we thought.
Absolutely. We always went tanning before we went to Florida.
Always went tanning. And they're actually really bad for you, totally increasing your risk of skin cancer and melanomas. And really, you shouldn't do them when you're young or under 18. And I don't know of a doctor who's going to give you permission to do that, but I guess that's the only way you can do it in Washington.
In Oregon, you have to have a doctor's letter if you are under 18. And that's for a reason, because the younger your skin is exposed, the more likely you get skin cancer. So really, it doesn't help you. Self tanners are fine, like the ones that are like the lotions you put on, or you go to like the spray tan, and they're pretty good these days. I mean, they don't make you like orange like the ones we used to have, right?
Or that some people still use.
Yeah, exactly. They're good ones. So
I don't know why anybody would use orange self tanning, but there are some people who still like to do that.
But I have to remember, though, they also do not protect you against the sun.
They do not. They are not going to protect you against sunburn. They're really not helpful. And I don't know. Anyway, the other thing not to use is baby oil and those things. You will get burned with those. And that's what we
Or don't lay on like a foil, like we did things.
Yes. So, and then if you did do that when you were young, just so you know, this is about kids, but go to a dermatologist regularly.
Right. Get your skin checked.
You will get skin cancer. So we're anticipating it.
So the other thing about summer is there are more bugs, which it's kind of nice here because there are definitely less bugs here than there were in Indiana, for sure.
Wind is really nice.
Yes, it blows them away. Yeah. But, to prevent insect bites, there's insect repellent, right? And the ones that are sold in the U.S., so they repel mosquitoes, biting flies, fleas, midges, chiggers, and ticks.
We had this whole long conversation that we don't really have chiggers here, although she disagrees with me. She thinks we might.
There's some kind of mite biting people here. I don't know if it's called a chigger or not, but those little red dots along your waistband, there's something there.
But we're not going to talk a lot about the other insect-borne diseases like malaria and dengue fever. We don't have those here. We're not going to really talk about them. So.
Yes. So the insect repellent that's been around the longest and is the most effective is DEET, and it lasts 10 to 12 hours, depending how much you use. It's safe and can be used down to 2 months old, but it's only safe if used in the appropriate amount.
And you never want to reapply DEET. So it is, and it is cumulative in the effect. So if you keep reapplying actually DEET, then we'll get higher absorption rates and can be more damaging. So that's really where DEET becomes dangerous. And in and of itself, applying it once is actually very safe and effective.
And if you take a shower and bath before you apply again, totally fine.
Yes, absolutely. And you can't also, if you're really worried about skin exposure, you cannot use DEET on your clothes. And that's still helpful. So if you basically spray the clothes with DEET and then put them on the child, that actually can be a really effective way for kind of preventing insect bites.
Picaridin is the one I usually recommend, and that is as effective as DEET. It just doesn't last as long, so you have to reapply it sooner, but it doesn't build up and become neurotoxic. It also doesn't smell as bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so there's a 20% one called Sawyer Picaridin, but I usually recommend like the Cutter Advanced and Cutter Advanced Sports, which are a little bit lower, but they're still effective.
Yeah, and they just don't last as long. So you just have to, those you do have to reapply, but you can.
Right.
So that's the nice thing. You also have this Bio UD one, which is like a tomato derived.
So cool, right? Like they just were like, what stops tomatoes being attacked by bugs? Oh, this stuff. We should make it into an insect repellent.
And it's called Bite Block, and very safe, but only 30% effective compared to like your DEET, which is your DEET is going to be your standard effectiveness because it is really effective.
Yeah, and this really cool one I've never heard of that's like clip-on, the vapor that's emitted through a fan.
It would be very cool.
Fluorescein or something. Very low toxicity, very effective, but you have to walk around with a fan blowing it. So it's a little bit weird.
But it's called the Off Clip-On Mosquito Repellent.
So cool.
And very low toxicity, but 70 to 80% effective compared to DEET, which is actually kind of cool.
Yes.
And then finally, you can do permethrin-treated clothing, which is not really repellent, but it actually just kind of kills the bugs that land on them and bite. So it works well.
Yeah, works well in that respect.
What's not effective?
Yeah. So citronella has to be just frequently applied to have any effect at all.
Yeah. So you can use it, but you have to reapply it very frequently.
And it's helpful for a space, like, citronella candles will help the bugs stay away from the space, but it actually won't help you as much to apply it to yourself.
Right. And then the bracelets, eating certain foods, not going to help against mosquitoes.
There's no garlic to prevent the vampires. That doesn't really thing,
Botanical oils, also not helpful. And then electronic devices that emit sound, not super helpful, again, for personal usage, but if you have a big space, it might be more helpful.
There. The other thing is, especially for little kids, not having them be out right at dusk. That's when the bugs are the most active, which is a little hard certain times of the year. But in the summer, that's kind of late at night. So it's a good time to put them to bed anyway.
Right. Dressing in hats, long sleeves, pants, and tucking pants into socks.
Which you definitely will always do, Corinna.
I hate socks, and I hate tucking my pants into socks. But it is very good. Like if you're going hiking or camping, it not only keeps away bugs and ticks, it also can be, you won't get poison oak and that type of thing, which is good. Yep. But I really don't ever do it, but I should.
You should.
And especially since I kind of like looking like a nerd, and that would be
would
like
fully
totally
seal
helpful.
the deal. I think. Preventing bee stings, wear things that look boring to a bee, right? So light, neutral colors, no perfume. Cover your food and drink when you're outside.
Especially those cans of things, because they can kind of get in there. You have that horrible story.
Yeah, so my nephew was at a marching band competition, and
as we laughed,
and the bee got into his drink, and he drank it, and so it stung his tongue, and his tongue swelled up. And in the middle of the marching band competition, he had to go by ambulance to the ER, and he was kind of a legend, especially because his shoes were duct taped, and so everybody saw his duct tape shoes. And so yes, cover your drink so the bee doesn't get.
And then if you have a bee, don't flap around and freak out, and just cover your mouth so that the bee doesn't go in. So
yeah, and it will leave you alone if you're not interesting.
Yeah.
So don't be interesting.
Don't be interesting.
Kind of like with bears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being boring is actually good. We talk about this in medicine a lot. If you're boring, basically it's good for you. If you're really interesting and people talk about you all the time, probably not so good.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the other parts about summer is water safety, because
That's right.
that's a big thing around here. A lot of water sports, a lot of water.
Yeah, and actually this is one of the ones that when my husband and I first got married and we decided to raise our children here, this was a really important thing to my husband. So we made our kids, we were the parents that, because I read this article that said the more you get your kids into things, the less they're going to do bad things when they get older.
They have no time to do the bad things.
Just don't let them have any time to do bad things. We literally, we put them in everything, right? Like all these sports and clubs, trying it all out, see what they liked. But one of the things that we, even if they hadn't liked it, that we said that they had to do was swim.
Yeah.
So we made them do swim lessons. We made them join a swim club, a swim team. And that was really because we live in an area that has a ton of water and we knew we were going to be around it and we wanted our kids to always be safe.
Yeah.
So water safety is so important.
Yes. And kind of the biggest thing that we know for kids, the most important thing for water safety is just supervise them. They should have adult supervision at all time, and actually parents looking for them, looking at them, not being distracted on their phone, not being somehow hindered in being alert.
Yeah, definitely. Not, like if you are going to go drink something or do something else where you might not have the best attention span for your child, another parent or another adult should be supervising.
Yeah.
Again, they need adult supervision all the time while kids are around water.
That's kind of like what my friends and I did when our kids were little, is we would just assign certain kids to each adult. So you always knew I was watching these 2 kids, even if they weren't mine, I was watching these 2 kids or 3 kids, but just giving responsibility for each individual kid, so someone is paying attention to where they are.
And then you can, especially if you're around rivers, lakes, streams, bodies of water that move at all, you really need life jackets.
Yeah.
Right? That's really important.
And as soon as you get there, just put it on. Put their sunblock on, put their life jacket on, and just leave it on the whole time you're there.
And the more you do that, if that's just part of your life, kids are going to do it.
Right.
If you let them get away with not doing it, then they're going to whine and complain.
Remember, that's the secret to parenting. Just keep doing it. And then they're like, oh, this is just how life is, right? So
I have no choice in this. I'm just going to do it.
Right?
And
life jackets are the ones that actually hold the kids upright, and so they'll keep their head above water. Life vests are the ones that are kind of more floaties, so they're not very helpful in bigger kids. They may be helpful for an infant that you're going to hold in your arms at all times. But if kids are around water and they're running around, just put a life jacket on them.
Yeah. And they have so many new cool things. Like for my kids, we did not only the sun protection ones, but they had actually life jackets that were inside, right? They had the things. So literally they have them on each side. So they just keep them upright.
Yes, just kind of bob around in the water.
So cute, very cute, but they couldn't hurt themselves, which is awesome. So,
and floaties and puddle jumpers are good for early swimmers when you go to pools, but they're just not realistic for when you're actually at a lake or a river where they could get submerged.
Right, exactly. And they also often give parents some false sense of security, which is also not what we want, right? We want them to be able to recognize that parents still need to be there. Even when your kid's in a life jacket, they shouldn't be in the water by themselves without you there. So,
right. And for pools, really, they just need to have a 4-foot high or higher fence around with a latching gate, just so that kids can't get in there, because something about pools just makes a toddler want to get in there.
And toddlers are so fast. It's like seconds, right? Yes. They see a ball floating or something's in there, and it's a momentary impulse and they're in there. And they have no fear. Yes. I just can't express that enough. Like toddlers, no fear of anything. And so you just have to not give them the opportunity to do that.
Right. And we encourage swim lessons. It's super important, I feel like, for people to learn how to swim. And it's interesting because they've shown that if you don't learn to swim before age 9, I think it's really hard to learn how to swim because you just realize how scary it is. Mm-hmm. But if you're young, you're like, it seems fine. I don't know. Everyone else is doing it. So, between 4 and 9 is ideally where you learn how to swim. Totally fine to do swim lessons before age 4, but you just don't have to, again, have that false sense of security that they actually can swim.
Right. And so I think that's there's so many good programs here for summer swim lessons for children. And the other thing we always talked about is there's also all these kids who are high school kids and they're on the swim team. Yeah. And they often need a little job.
Make some cash.
They can make some cash.
Make some Venmo now.
Venmo.
Nobody knows what cash is anymore.
That's right. But they can make some money like teaching your kid to swim,
Swim
right?
lessons.
So, and that's another less expensive way. But there's also a lot of scholarships in most programs now.
Yeah.
So we have scholarships here at our pool too.
Yeah.
So really important. And the thing to remember is drowning is it's actually one of the worst things ever to see.
And very few
in the
times
medical
does
profession.
drowning in kid happen when adults are not around. Typically, there are adults around.
They're
We
just
just
not
lost
paying
track of the
attention.
kids. Yeah.
Right. And drowning is preventable in most cases. And that's the thing to remember is that we can keep our kids safe from and still have a lot of fun in the water.
Yes. And the other best part about summer is that it's hot.
Again, for you.
I really like that. But sometimes it's a little too much, right? And there's heat, cramps, exhaustion, stroke. There's two kinds. Like there's exertional versus non-exertional.
Right. And the non-exertional is where you might take your kids in a car someplace or your pets in a car and you kind of get in a place where you didn't realize it was so hot and it's an enclosed space and you're keeping your kids there too long. That's the non-exertional. And part of that is because babies just don't sweat.
Right.
Like older kids.
Surface area is so much less in their volume that they can't get rid of the heat enough. So in a hot situation, they just get hotter and hotter and hotter.
Right. And it can be really dangerous. So the other thing we just talk about, and we have this probably happen every year, unfortunately, somewhere in the country where a child is left in a car too long or left in a space too long and it gets too hot. And the thing to remember is that, especially with car seats now, they're in the back seat, they're turned around. If you're not used to taking your child to work, just make it a pattern that you do where you have mirrors, like you put music on if you have the kid in the car. You do something where you just always remember
they're back there falling asleep in the car seat.
Yes, exactly. So, and so that you never put your child in that situation. And there's really now, you never leave a child in a car, even to go for a few minutes to the store. Yeah. Right. Especially since the pandemic. Now you can just order things ahead of time.
And they'll bring them to the parking lot.
Right. You never have to go in, which is totally nice because taking 3 children into the store is miserable.
It is.
So it's kind of nice that you don't have to do that anymore.
Yes. And, when you're outside sometimes in the summer, if you're not in a place where there's wind as much and kids are just getting hotter, and you notice they're just slowing down and they're getting really red, what you want to do is try to get them as cool as you can without actually immersing them in water. So having like a little water spray, spraying some water from a water bottle on them, but cooling blankets, some ice packs. If you just want to cool them, we call evaporative cooling, which means just like the water evaporate, because it really is unpleasant and sometimes dangerous to just immerse them in cold water.
And then the other one is like your more exertional type of heat stroke or heat exhaustion.
And that's the classic, doing sports outside when it's a hot day, classic football practice.
All those movies again.
I know. Remember the Titans? I love that movie. But the part where they're like, training in the summer and it's in Mississippi and it's so hot and the coach is like, water is for wimps. It's not true. Water is good. It's actually, helpful to your body.
And it's really good to
prehydrate. Right. Don't wait till you're actually hot. Like the 10 to 12 hours before you exercise, drink a lot of water. Have your teenage boys drink a lot of water.
They need to be drinking a ton through each night and into the next day of practice. So before they even go. And yes, they might need to pee. And it's okay to stop for that too.
Right. And, really, and kind of just talking to your kids about, if you feel bad, if you feel nauseous, if you feel kind of weak, like listen to your body and take a break. Don't push through it because that's how kids end up with heat cramps, which becomes a heat exhaustion, which can be a heat stroke, and that can cause like muscle damage and kidney damage.
And really, it's organ damage because your body is releasing substances within your bloodstream that are just not good for it, and and we don't get them out very quickly. So those things can build up in your bloodstream and cause organ damage. So it is really important to recognize that heat exhaustion and stroke is a real thing.
Yeah,
and
we see it every summer. I always see some teenage boys either from sports or just working outside that they end up with some kidney damage, at least temporarily. So,
and then the other thing we talk about is a little bit like fireworks.
Fireworks is a summer thing.
It is a summer thing, right? And fireworks in our town, we haven't even been allowed to have them.
Yeah, in Hood River.
In Hood River and actually I think across the
in the gorge. We'll just say the gorge. We'll say the city.
For this last bit, just because we've had such high fire danger. And now Hood River just made I don't know if somebody caught that in the paper, but they just passed an actual ordinance that we're not going to allow fireworks anymore. From basically, you're only going to get to do it in January.
Everything's dead anyway.
But I think that's really good because the majority of fireworks can be really dangerous. Estimates like to say in like 2017, about 12,900 people were treated in hospital emergency rooms for injuries associated with fireworks. 67% of those all in a 1 month period, typically in June and July.
What a great holiday.
Yeah. And most of the injuries involve like hands and fingers, head, including face, eyes. And then children under 15 years accounted for almost 40% of that.
Right. And there just are no safe fireworks. Even like the little sparklers, like every year, somehow my son would burn my daughter. Like, even though you're like, be careful, don't stand that close to her. It would always happen every year, right?
And we had little fireworks that we would do at our house. We never did the kind of big, dangerous ones, but we had literally 2 ER doctors, some firemen, like all of us like around. And if you are going to have even sparklers and things, you need to take precautions. There need to be nothing around that can catch fire.
You should not be throwing them.
You should not be throwing them. My brother like had this story when he was with his cousin where they had
It's also your cousin.
It's also my cousin.
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to claim it right now?
I wasn't there though. I would not have been this dumb, even though I was 5 years younger. But anyway, they had the little twister fireworks, and they were throwing them at each other, and threw one at my brother. My cousin threw one at my brother, and it got caught in his hoodie and burned his back and neck. And again, luckily, didn't do long-term damage. But it's just kids are kind of impulsive and sort of dumb with things that can be dangerous, right? So they need always to have people right there watching them. And then you need to be able to put them out very quickly. All children, including older children, should be well supervised.
Yes. So other summer things we think about in terms of danger, playground equipment gets hotter. So just remind your kids of that. Like, if, at the end of the day, it's been out in the sun, it's going to burn their legs. So put some water on it first, wear some pants so they don't get burns.
Right. And then trampolines.
Yes.
I know. A summer thing. A
summer thing that, trampolines are one of the things we really, as pediatricians, don't love kids to be on, but we accept that they need sometimes to jump around and be active.
Yes. And the big things about trampolines are really that you can use them safely if you have some setups for it, including always needs a net.
Yep.
One of the biggest reasons that people injure themselves on trampoline is that they fall off.
Mm-hmm.
And so they jump, they fall off, break an arm, break a leg, whatever, right?
Yep.
And so netting can be really helpful, and effective netting and a good trampoline. And then the other thing is really looking about rules on the trampoline. You don't have 10 people on a trampoline bouncing together. You shouldn't have really more than two.
Yes.
And then
they should be about the same size.
About the same size.
Otherwise, someone just keeps getting spiked and they keep flying over the edge.
The dad spiking the kid.
Exactly.
Like, that's really not so safe.
Yes. Yeah.
And then no flips.
Yeah.
Don't flip. The trampoline is not the place to flip safely, especially if there's other people on it. But you can see a lot of spinal injuries for kids landing inappropriately or wrong on a trampoline.
Yeah.
So trampolines also can be really dangerous. But they can also be fun if used correctly.
Right.
So.
And then just in general, there's just more injuries when kids are outside more. So, broken arms, broken legs from just falling, from just being a kid. And the general rule is if you fall from your own feet, you're not going to probably have a serious injury. If you fall from something higher than your own feet, like a tree or a trampoline, you're going to be more seriously injured. So just be aware.
Yeah. And then you can also, as parents, I always had like a little medical kit in my bag where Band-Aids, ointments, extra sunscreen.
Yes.
Like
that's a good segue to treating insect bites.
That's
good job. Good segue there. So let's talk about some treatment for the summer thing. So insect bites, we'll start there.
Okay.
So mosquitoes, fire ants, chiggers, they don't believe they're here. All of those can give you a little local reaction. So when they bite you, it kind of depends on your own skin and your own immune system. You can get a red swollen area. I'm strong I don't know what the word is. I'm not like supporting
Proponent?
it. No, the other way.
Oh,
I'm really against it. Topical antihistamine, which is when you buy the anti-itch stuff, if it says active ingredient diphenhydramine, that's Benadryl. And what happens with those products is we first put it on, everything's better, and then it wears off and it comes back bigger and redder and itchier. It sensitizes the area. So try to avoid anything that says diphenhydramine.
You can
directly.
do oral antihistamines. So oral Benadryl, oral
swallowing
those
it,
actually those are fine.
Yes.
And then but the creams that work the best are typically like your hydrocortisone or your steroid creams. They actually can be they can help with itching a lot. And then your Caladryl or Sarna cream.
Yeah.
And I guess the Caladryl used to have Benadryl in it, but now it's been taken out.
Yeah, Pramoxine in there.
Mm-hmm. And then calamine lotion is also
It'll
really
just help
helpful.
soothe it till they can avoid it. And if it's red in the first, 24 hours or so, it's inflammation. So your body's just freaking out about it. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate that from infection by looking at it because they'll be red and swollen and, touching it. And if the redness goes away and it's not painful, it's usually going to be inflammation, but it really is that first 24 hours.
And then the other thing is if it's happening after that, if all of a sudden it's 2 days out when it should be getting better and it's now getting a lot worse, increasing redness, increasing swelling, increasing pain, that's usually more of an infection. And that has to do with the fact that they were scratching so hard that they actually got all the little bacteria under their nails and now it's in their skin.
Let's not think about bacteria under your nails. It's so gross.
But yes, but that is how they get it. It's from itching.
Yes. And it's hard with dramatic kids sometimes because you touch it and they always scream. But really, inflammation will not look red when you put your finger on it.
And it does take a couple of days for that infection to happen.
It does.
And then what about ticks? Because you actually, we have ticks everywhere here right now. They're all over the place. But we do have less of the diseases ticks cause in the Northwest than, for example, in the Northeast and even some of the
the classic one is Lyme, which there's not a large amount of Lyme disease here. And there was not really in Indiana either. Indiana had more of the Rocky Mountain spotted fever and the riclosis and really scary stuff like that. But the key to preventing tick bite injury is just after you've been outside doing the tick check, right? Yeah. Which running your hands along, especially the hairline and along the edge of clothing, because ticks like to be on the warm places, which is kind of your pulse points, basically.
And then also checking your pets, right?
Yes.
Because that's a lot of times how kids get ticks is from pets.
Yeah.
So it's on the pet fur, they hug them, they love on them, and then they actually get the tick from them.
Yeah.
So checking both pets and children as well as yourself when you're coming out.
Yeah.
And then again, wearing appropriate clothing when you're hiking or that type of thing, coverage, hat, those types of things help getting ticks on.
Tucking your socks in,
which again, I don't love, but works well. And then what about, do we treat everybody with a tick
No,
bite?
we do not. So when you find a tick, you need to pull it off, right? Best way to pull it off is tweezers. So we always just pack tweezers in our camping stuff. Because if you try to pull it off with your fingers, a lot of times you leave the head on, which is gross, and also the part that's going to have the disease.
It is gross.
So when you pull off with tweezers, you kind of pull at the head and the whole thing will just kind of pop off. And you can buy little tick removers, but they're just fancy tweezers. So just take tweezers.
Yeah.
And then, we talked about the insect bite. If kind of red initially, probably not infection, but it could become infection. So anytime you've found a tick and you pulled it off, wash the area with some soap and water, and then put a little antibiotic ointment on that area.
Again, because that's more likely to be a bacterial infection if it does it. But then do you have to worry about Lyme disease or infection?
So Lyme disease is never going to be transmitted in that first 24 hours the tick is there.
Right.
So if you know when the tick happened, pulled it off, you're good. But if you knew it happened within 24 hours.
Right. And so you do not need prophylactic antibiotics. You do not need antibiotics.
No.
If it's been there or you don't know how long it's been there, and it could have been on longer than 36 hours, this is one of those times where bathing every day, especially if your kids are outside playing in wooded areas and that type of thing, it's good for the summertime to bathe every day.
Yeah.
Because again, you want to make sure that there's not anything hanging out there for long periods of time. And it makes them less stinky. But anyway, but let's say we didn't bathe them. We didn't know it was there. And it's now been 70 or 48 hours. Do you recommend prophylaxis then?
At that point for a kid, and non-pregnant adult, yes, you would go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And then after, like, you really need to start that prophylaxis before 72 hours. And then after 72 hours, it's more treatment. Like, if you're really worried they have a characteristic ring around it, you're worried that there's actually like some tick infection.
Because Lyme is preventable, but not really that treatable.
Right. So trying to do it ahead of time. And most docs will do that. If it's within 24 hours, they're going to not recommend prophylaxis at all. But if it is in that area where it's the 48 to 72, they probably will recommend prophylaxis just to be safe, because it is much easier to prevent it than treat it.
Yes. So. All right. Bee sting. So if you get stung by a bee, because you were waving your arms around and then they stung you, you want to get the stinger out as fast as you can, like just flick it off or scrape it off. You don't have to dig it out.
Right. And then expect a reaction.
You're definitely going to react.
You're going to get like a little redness, and just apply ice, like cool compresses, and watch for more severe like swelling reaction if you're worried about it.
And they're not subtle severe reactions.
No,
so it's like swollen eyes
fast.
and mouth, and it's pretty fast for sure.
Yeah. And then what about sunburn treatment?
Yeah, just calm it down, calm the cool. We did this so much, right? We're like pros at this. Aloe vera, whether it's the plant or the lotion.
Or we had the huge aloe vera plants at my house where you could just slobber it on. Again, because we were stupid and did baby oil.
Yes, lots of fluids. Don't pop any blisters.
Right.
That's in general life. Try not to pop blisters because they're there as a sterile protectant of your skin. But once they pop, then you can kind of wipe off the debris.
And you can actually close over them, because once they pop, that's actually when it hurts a lot, is that once air get exposed to that skin underneath, you're going to have a lot of pain associated with it. So cover it after.
You can take some ibuprofen for pain.
Yeah.
And occasionally we do steroids for severe sunburn, but it's not like a recommended routine treatment of sunburn.
And then a lot of times in the summer, you'll get eczema flares because of heat, because of sweating. Triggers like chlorine or like sitting on furniture with exposed skin all kind of make eczema worse.
Yeah.
So really, it's eczema hygiene for that, and make sure you're keeping up on your ointments and steroids, topical steroids if needed.
Yeah. And poison ivy and poison oak. So I've never had to live anywhere with poison oak before. It's always been poison ivy, but they do the same thing.
They do. They're exactly the same, right? Like not in the type, what they kind of have on your skin is exactly the same. So really preventing poison oak here is what we have mostly here. You wash off after so if you've covered, so that's the first thing. Again, if you're hiking, there's places that could have poison oak. Cover and tuck your socks in.
Wear socks.
Wear socks. And make sure that you're not getting it on your skin. But really, from poison oak and poison ivy, it's the oil that gets on there. So the most important part is washing afterwards.
And it's such an interesting thing, because not everyone's allergic to it, right? So you can get the oil on you and you'll be fine, but someone else gets it and they're going to have a reaction. And every time they get exposed, it's going to be more and more dramatic.
And the oil is on both the leaves and the stems or branches, right? Yeah. So even in the winter, you can get poison oak if you rub up against some branches that are there. So it is important just washing after that. You can also have to be aware of what is in a bonfire, like being burned, because that can also spread.
Every year you see some kids, their eyes are swollen shut because they were at a bonfire and all of it was aerosolized and got on their face.
Yeah. And rash usually doesn't come right away.
Nope. Like 2 days later, typically.
Yeah. So at that point, it's no longer contagious. Your oil, as long as they've had a bath, is off the skin. Mm-hmm. So they're not spreading it to any place else. But that's when it starts.
Yeah. Well, and it can be anywhere in your body that the oil was on your skin and you touched. So if you pee in the woods after you had it on your hands, well, that is always a thing.
It can go other places.
So sometimes it doesn't have to be like matching places, but you can think, oh, maybe that part got touched while I was out in the woods.
Yeah. And I think one of the other big culprits of poison oak, as well as ticks, is pets.
Yes.
Right. So they get the oil on their fur, and then you have these kids that just literally grab them, and all of a sudden poison oak is all over their face and body. So when you're going from places that have poison oak, or if you have your dogs that are let out back and it has a whole poison oak, they need to be washed regularly, because that oil does get on their fur and can transmit to kids.
Yeah, and kind of the same treatment as insect bites, right? You put steroid cream, take Benadryl or Zyrtec or Claritin. If it's really widespread, like on your face,
and you
or
often will need oral
genital
steroids.
area, then you'll do oral steroids.
Yeah. And then there are other illnesses that can be spread in the summer: hand, foot, and mouth disease, norovirus. We talked about polio, but luckily that's not happening.
Yes.
But the other big thing that we want to think of is that if you have kids in their swim diapers in the pool and they poop, take them out.
Yes, please. Take them out
Let's try not to spread it to anybody else.
Exactly.
And realize that when they're all doing those things, really try not to have them eat or put stuff in their mouth after they've kind of played in those areas. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's all the summer safety.
Yeah, a whole bit of how to keep your kids happy, safe, and healthy this summer.
Okay, I'm Dr. Joanne Smith.
And I'm Dr. Corinda Hankins. And this is A Pod Full of Pediatrics.